Welcome to the Jacob Wayne Show. I am your Jacob Wayne, and with me, as always, is the rest of my body that makes up Jacob Wayne Briner. How is everybody doing? This is a quick little solo episode. I'm flying out to Salt Lake City tomorrow to join my friends Devin and Sarah in our annual Super Bowl weekend hangout. Although we haven't been able to do that the last 2 years, or maybe just one. Actually, it might just be one. We had to miss that because of this thing called COVID. And there's still COVID around, but we're vaxxed, waxed, and ready to relax and party. And so I'm going to be flying out to Salt Lake City and watching the big game with them. What's fun is that we don't know exactly where we're going to be watching it. A couple things got messed up, and we're kind of arranging things, but we will watch this game and we will have wings. So as far as the wings thing goes, we might as well get into what I'm sipping and food stuff. We like to do that at the top of every show. I'm just sipping coffee, so there's that. And as far as food goes, I'm excited to get to Salt Lake City and see what I can eat. There's this place does sub sandwiches called Moochie's. I hope it's still there. It's been a long time since I've eaten that. But I would love to eat Moochie's. It's a delicious sub spot in Salt Lake City. Also, excuse me, Red Iguana. Incredible Mexican food. And then when I go up to Cache Valley, which is at the top of Utah, Logan, Utah, my hometown, where our boy Kellen Gibbons is still residing, I'm going to hopefully go to church. Not Mormon church, my church, which is Tandoori Oven, the most amazing Indian food I've had in my life to this day. I keep trying out new spots. Nothing quite tops it. It's incredible. So those are my food goals: Red Iguana, Moochie's, Tandoori. If they can happen, great. Moochie's is a little more important because it's been so long, but the other two, man, any chance I can get. So that being said, I got to pack today. I got to do a couple recording things with Shakalak, Shaki, and Gamapa. Kind of leave them with some things to arrange, mix, and edit while I'm gone. And yeah. So with that, we'll just get into our segments, see how long the show lasts. There was a debate, like, do we take another week off after we recently just took 2 weeks off? I was like, nah, I can do a quick solo one, even if we recorded I want to say 3 days ago. So there's not a lot of fresh stuff in the news. What I do find is that this show, by design, has slowly morphed into a current events update show. I think that's my comfort zone. I mean, we can do the philosophy stuff and fun little games and trivia and all that. I do like those segments, but I like a good update show talking about stuff that's currently happening in the world, and just breaking it down with our opinion of it. That's what I like to do. And so one thing I can do that we almost never do on this show is do a little bit of a sports thing. I'm pretty into sports. Am I a sports fanatic? No. I usually pick my favorite teams based on how ridiculous the team name is, or like, like perhaps ugly the uniform maybe. And that's all subjective. Like, for example, I used to say that my favorite team was the Cleveland Browns, not because they were actually my favorite team. It was just like the Browns, and just everything's brown, and they're except their helmet, which is like a burnt orange. And then I love the simplicity of that. There's like, well, what's the logo for a brown? It's like, just our helmet. The orange burnt helmet. It's like, okay. So, and I love it, and Browns duty. It's silly. But, I'll maybe also pick favorite teams based on that and names and such, or if they're an underdog, like if they're just a team that has this reputation of kind of sucking. And so and I love sports video games, I always burn out on them and then kind of wait a little bit and then get a new one. And from what I understand, as far as the gaming world goes, is that those games are pretty much regurgitated trash. And they're fun, but they don't really do a lot to make the mechanics different any one installment to the next. So I get a little burnout, then I get one after a couple of years. And that's kind of how I go about it. But I definitely played more of them back in the day. So that's kind of where I found my favorite teams. And when I would play Madden, whatever year it would be, just Madden football, I'd either be the Cleveland Browns, the Seattle Seahawks, which is my favorite team now. And we'll get into that, actually. That's kind of a fun story. Or the Cincinnati Bengals, because Bengals, what's a Bengal? Oh, it's Bengal tiger. They got the tiger stripes on their helmet. I always thought that was like really cool. So that being said, this Super Bowl is the Cincinnati Bengals versus the LA Rams. I don't really like the Rams because they're in the same division as the Seattle Seahawks. So Seahawks is my favorite. They had a rough year, didn't even make the playoffs. And so go Cincinnati Bengals. And I know some of you loyal listeners of the Jacob Wayne Show might recall the episode where I shat upon the city of Cincinnati for no reason other than to just talk shit. So I'm continuing that. I am not reversing my stance. I will not flip-flop on this issue. Fuck you, Cincinnati. Good luck, Bengals. I hope you win, you dirty pieces of shit. All right. So, Seahawks, the story. I'll get back to that real quick. When I lived in China, Hangzhou, for I think it was a little less than a year, but a year. I was coming up near the end of my time there, and it was the big debate about, do I stay in China for another year contract? I don't really have enough money to go home and visit and then fly right back. Or do I just come back to the States and kind of recollect? What I knew is that I didn't want to move back to Utah. That was a definite, like, I'm done living there for a while, if not forever. And I was like, I can't do Utah. So do I pick up another contract? But I was exhausted. My particular setup living in China was not the best. I didn't have a great contract with the school I worked at. And it was like a lot of iffy, sad bullshit that maybe I'll tell stories about it one day, but that's not really what we're here to talk about. So my friends, Devin and Sarah, the ones that I started this Super Bowl tradition with, said, hey, why don't you move out to Port Orchard, Washington, which is like across the water a bit from Seattle. You can hop on this little boat, then hop onto the ferry in Bremerton. You float across, takes about 30-40 minutes, something like that, and then you're in Seattle. And I was like, Seattle. back when I was a little Mormon boy, uh, many young Mormon boys and some Mormon girls dream of going on a mission. And where would they want to go? And I was like, I want to go to Seattle because I had seen like movies like Harry and the Hendersons and things like that. And it looked green, and maybe I'd get to meet a Sasquatch and coffee, which I know isn't being a good Mormon boy, but I just love the vibe. But I'm talking about Seattle in the 80s, 90s, the land of Nirvana and Soundgarden and all that. So when they were like, you want to try out Port Orchard, the air pollution in Hangzhou at the time in China where I was at was just terrible. So all I could think was clean air, lots of green, trees. It's not hot tropical swamp. It's a little more airflow. It's nice, Pacific Northwest. I can stop doing as many drugs as I was doing in China, which I was, and kind of wheel it back a little bit. Maybe smoke a little bit of pot, sip coffee, read books. It sounded really nice. So I was like, all right, I'm going to move to Washington. And I was there for a week. And it was like the week or two after I showed up was going to be the Super Bowl that Seattle was in. A joke that sticks with me from like 2000, it was 2014, and the Colbert Report was still on. One of my favorite shows, and I really can't get into late night with Stephen Colbert. It's not the same. I love Stephen Colbert, but I miss the Colbert Report. And one of the jokes, he was talking about Denver Broncos versus the Seattle Seahawks. And at the time, they were the two places that had legalized marijuana, which might have been a reason I moved there as well. But it was kind of like the pothead Super Bowl. And I can't remember what he called the Broncos, but he called the Seattle Seahawks the Seattle Sad Birds, because if you look at the logo for the Seattle Seahawks, it looks like a very sad bird. And I was like, Seattle Sad Birds, fuck yeah. Like, and if you remember, when I would play the video game back in the day, I would regularly use the Seattle Seahawks. So I did have some love for them. But at the time, football was like lower on my list. I didn't ever really watch it. I was always more of a basketball guy. And essentially, I talked a little shit. I was like, football, who gives a shit? And my buddy Devin was like, dude, fuck that. I love football. Football is huge in my family. You should like football. And I was like, fuck that. And little cantankerous, but I'm going to live with the guy and his wife, Sarah, my old friend. I should probably try to understand what they're into and what they like. But when I'm looking back, that first little bit I moved there, I remember being like kind of moody and against whatever they were into, just because that was the stance you take. If you're artist, musician type, you're like, okay, like sports, like, ugh. But as I've grown older, it's like you're into what you're into. You can like anything. There's some things more than others. You don't have to like anything, but you also don't have to talk shit on what other people are into. But that's a whole other tangent. So watching the Colbert Report, Seattle Sadbirds, Denver, all that stuff. And then it just starts clicking like, oh, like Seattle's in the Super Bowl next Sunday. And they don't have, for those that don't know, they don't have the Super Bowl at any of the one team's stadiums, unless it just works out that way. But they plan where the Super Bowl is going to be each year. So it wasn't like the Super Bowl was taking place in Seattle. And I don't even know if it would have. Maybe Denver had the better record that year, but yeah, it's happening somewhere else. That being said, if you're in the city of the team who wins, it's going to get a little crazy and like wild. So I don't think Seattle was projected to win. I think at the time, Peyton Manning, a well-known quarterback, for some that don't know, was in Denver, and I think they had the odds to win. So it's like, oh, whatever, we'll just go and have a good time, one way or the other. So we caught the ferry, we went over, we found a spot at a bar, and they had a bunch of bowls of Skittles out because Marshawn Lynch was on the Seattle Seahawks team. You might have seen this guy. He's like, I'm just here so I don't get fined. Like, he was awesome with reporters. He's been in some shows like Westworld and other things like that since. Like, he's just a really charming, charismatic guy. And so Devin was showing me all these clips of the different guys on the Seahawks team. And I was like, man, these guys are like pretty great. Like, I'm drawing a blank off the top of Richard Sherman. He like had this big, like, don't you ever say my name about that shit again. Like, really aggressive. And I was like, I like this. This Legion of Boom was their defensive team. And anyway, we get into Seattle. They got the big bowls of Skittles because Marshawn Lynch likes Skittles. I was like, we just like Skittles? Like, yeah. And everybody knows he's into Skittles, so we like Skittles too. I was like, okay, I'm in. And I think I ended up doing a painting a couple of years later of like, I was when Marshawn Lynch retired. We didn't know he was going to come back for a season or whatever, but it was like him all zenned out under a Skittle tree because he likes Skittles. And, you know, there, when he goes into the game, there's beast mode. So I called the painting Peace Mode because he's retired. He gets to relax. But it's one of my favorite paintings. But we proceed to watch the game, and the Seahawks blow out the Broncos, like destroy them. I think it was like 48-13 or something like that. And so at about halftime, you know, it's like you can't turn it around, but we're like, holy shit, I think Seattle's won this one, so this city's gonna go a little crazy. And yeah, as soon as the game was over, Seattle won. Like, the city went off. And so we just went outside and started walking towards kind of Pioneer Square. If you know Seattle, it's not really downtown, but it's like it's a major hub spot. And we started walking towards Pioneer Square, and there's people everywhere just screaming, yelling, flying Seahawks flags. Everybody's like smoking joints. And one thing I'll never forget is there was a bunch of cop cars, but the cops are celebrating too. And there was this one guy with the joint, and he had his arm around the cop. And the cops just celebrating. He's not smoking. They're just taking a photo. Like, hell yeah, Seattle Seahawks. Let's go. We are 12s. Like, they say that the 12s are all the fans, like the 12th man. And everybody, they're smoking weed, they're celebrating. It's a beautiful night. It's like pretty nice for February. And you got to remember, I had only been back in the United States after a year for like a week. So I was having I remember I had a little more reverse culture shock than culture shock. For those of you that don't know exactly what that means, is when I went to China, I was prepared for it to be different than the United States. So I was kind of always, okay, that's a little odd. That's a little strange. Oh, that's kind of similar. I acclimated to China pretty well, even though there is a little bit of like euphoria from the first bit you get there. Like, everything's new and different and amazing. And then when that euphoria goes down, you start to have this feeling of, I miss all the things that were comforts back home. And then you start getting frustrated by all the differences. And then you kind of had this little depression. And then you get out of that and life regulates and you acclimate. Coming back to the United States, even at the airport, the first day, I was just like, holy shit, like, Americans are really aggressive. It was the main thing that like stood out to me, is because I was just watching different airport workers like interacting, and just how anxious and bossy they were with like people just looking for their luggage, you know, little things. She's like, your luggage right over there, man. Like, oh, okay. Like, it was just totally a different vibe. And it took me a couple months being back in the States to be like totally like, okay, no, like this is my home country. I know this. It's like, so I was a little bit in like a surreal dream-like headspace, but that night, everybody celebrating in Seattle, dudes smoking joints with the cops just standing right there, green, delicious air, and Seattle is a delicious city, as many people may not be aware, but yeah, that was the moment where I was like, man, this is like quintessential like American stuff. So from that point on, I was like, man, football, yeah, I'm in. I like football. It can have its issues, no doubt about it. I'm very aware of that. But as I started to understand the game more and with like watching games with Devin, that became a lot of fun when I lived with him, just waking up on Sundays and having a couple beers and watching the games. I had never really done that. And so football has become a game I really like. I think basketball is still number one. And one thing I'll get into with the basketball real quick is a shout out to the Jingling Joe Ingles from the Utah Jazz. He injured his knee, poor guy, but I think that kind of set him up to be traded during this All-Star break, and he's going to Portland. A lot of people theorize that that's just to make the trade work and see if Utah can push for the championship this year. But maybe they'll try to get him back, or maybe just have him come back after he's retired and become like an assistant coach or something. But Utah loves him. All my favorite sports teams are Seattle based because of that, just living there and seeing what kind of a sports city Seattle is. So I'm like Seattle Kraken, which was fun to watch that kind of come together. That's hockey. Seattle Sounders for football or soccer. Seattle Mariners, went to a lot of those games with my buddy Kellen, not the one on the show, but my other buddy Kellen. Had a lot of good times going there. Also, my buddy Jacob Andes had some great Mariners games. So I'm like Seattle sports all the way since 2014, 2015. But they lost the Seattle Supersonics to Oklahoma City, who are now the Oklahoma City Thunder. So fuck that team. And Utah Jazz. I grew up watching the Jazz, and I remember when I was young and the Jazz went to the finals 2 years in a row. It's the only time they've made it there. They were playing the Chicago Bulls and Michael Jordan, arguably one of the best teams to have ever been assembled. So our chances of winning would have been great had we not been playing Jordan's Bulls. And I was a young lad. I think that was 97, 98, 96, 97 might have been the years. And so I would have been 11 or 12 or 12, 13. And 11 or 12 actually makes more sense. And I cried. I openly wept when the Utah Jazz lost to the Bulls. I was a boy, and I was like, this is our time. This is Utah's time. Utah can win, and let's do it. And come on, Karl Malone and John Stockton. Just fun and naive. I remember being like a little helper boy at a wedding, and I had jazz or go jazz shaved into my head. All the people at the wedding reception were just like, yeah, we're gonna win, we're done. And then we didn't. And my young boyish mind was like, I'm never gonna root for a sports team like that again. They broke my heart. And it's just, I think I kind of conscientiously like went away from sports for years because of that. So I don't care. And then of course I became 13. I became more interested in things like bass guitar and vagina. And yeah, just my interest shifted. I was playing basketball. I quit playing partially because I wasn't that great at it, but also like you met like the kids that played basketball at your school. Like, wow, a lot of assholes on that team. I'd rather not associate with them. So became a dirty musician, pothead artist. Kind of that stuck. Not as big of a pothead as I was in high school, actually, but it works its way in. I still like seeing a pothead lighting up a joint, hugging a cop, clearly from the Seattle story. So, Utah Jazz, they're my number one team until the Seattle Supersonics come back. Sorry, but I gotta stay with Seattle, and I love the Seattle Supersonics. That during that era when I was a little boy, the Sonics versus Jazz games were great. They had a wonderful team. They played the Bulls the year before the Jazz played, and that was like Gary Payton and Sean Kemp and Detlef Schrempf, a couple other guys I can't really remember off the top of my head, but yeah. So Joe Ingles, a beloved Jazz person, he's going off to Seattle, or sorry, not Seattle, Portland. Portland Trail Blazers, another team I think is pretty all right. And then another big trade is kind of this year, there was a lot of teams doing the super team thing, and they were like combining all these people like Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Kyrie Irving. And I like Brooklyn being a super team more than the Lakers. I don't know why, but I was like, all right, I want to see Brooklyn do some things, but they have really kind of fallen apart this year. And so is the Super Lakers. And that's been awesome to see because I like it when it's more competitive and you don't know exactly who's going to win every year. I'm almost always will root for a small market team. And James Harden, he is getting traded to the Philadelphia 76ers, and he's going to be playing with Joel Embiid, who's one of the candidates for MVP this year. And then they offloaded this kind of, I think he was the dude. He might have been the dude that stole Rookie of the Year from Donovan Mitchell, another amazing Jazz player that you might have heard of if you're into it. But Ben Simmons, they traded Ben Simmons to the Brooklyn Nets, and he's an odd guy. It's like, I think he won Rookie of the Year, and then after that, he just mentally is just out of the game. Like he's not committed, and so has this giant contract with the Sixers, and they've just been trying to get rid of him, and they finally did in this blockbuster trade. And so Lakers sucking, Brooklyn getting shaken up, not exactly a super team. 76ers become more interesting with James Harden coming on. And I got a love-hate thing with James Harden. Like the way he plays really frustrates me because he kind of analyzes the rules, and which I respect, but at the same time, like I even heard a theory like the reason he grew such a giant beard is just because it's easier to like look like you got hit. So it's this flopping strategy of like just getting fouled, and I don't like it. And it makes for boring basketball. And when he played with the Rockets, I think he was the scoring leader for a bunch of seasons and even won MVP. But it was just really boring basketball to watch. And so, but I don't know. A fellow big boy, he's kind of got a little more plump in the belly, and he's got the beard. I like the beard, so I hope it's a little more fun and playing in Philadelphia, and it kind of shakes the league up. But that being said, go Jazz, bring back the Supersonics. I think that wraps up my sports talk. Maybe if you don't like me talking about sports, feel free to write us at thejacobwayneshow@gmail.com or fakoshka@gmail.com. Because I don't mind talking about it, but I am by no means an expert. If there's a person who's really into basketball or sports in general, they could probably sit here with me and be like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, none of what you're saying makes much sense. And I'd be like, well, you're probably right. It's not my main interest, but I do like it. I do like to keep up on it. So on these little solo episodes, I can definitely give you my little sports thinks when it's just me, because I think most of my guests and friends, their eyes would glaze over if I started talking about sports with them on my podcast. That's right, my podcast. So I could do what I want.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Let's get into music real quick. Is there any new music releases that are worth mentioning? Like I said, I'm recording this about 3 days after the last time we recorded, so a lot of things have not changed much. There's a new release by the metal band Napalm Death. I haven't given it a listen yet, but that is one of my favorite heavier bands. A new track by Killing Joke. I love them. They're like a 80s punky new wave kind of band that's just been around for years and had a huge influence on bands I'm into, like Tool and Korn, and saw them live up in Seattle, and it was like one of my favorite concerts in recent memory. And they're getting really old. Their singer, you should look him up. I can't go off on him too much off the top of my head because I forget a lot of the details, but Chaz, he like writes symphonies and does all this other stuff. Like, he's definitely a modern polymath, like a jack of all trades, does all kinds of things. And so, new track by Killing Joke, Lord of Chaos. Rocked that at least once. I liked it. I love it. Apparently there's a new release by Boris, another group I like, that Spotify
666, the mark of the beast.
They didn't let me know that Boris was coming out with something new, so I'm going to need to try that out. I had to go to pitchfork.com to learn about that. There's apparently another Eddie Vedder album, Earthling, that's came out, and that's not my stuff, but maybe you as a listener are into that and check it out. That is the one band from the Seattle grunge area that I could just never get into Pearl Jam. I don't hate them or dislike them, but just I'm more Nirvana, Melvin, Soundgarden, Mudhoney, that kind of thing. So that's music for now. Let's talk about movies. So if you remember in the last episode, I was listing off the Best Picture nominations to Kellen. And Kellen doesn't watch movies quite as much as I do, because I asked him if he'd seen any of the nominations. I think it was a no on all of them. I don't know if he's going to be able to watch all these movies by the time the Oscars come up. So I told him that he needs to watch Dune and The Power of the Dog as his assignment for next time we record. So this is going to be coming out on Wednesday. It is Friday today, so he has that much time to do it. And I'm going to go ahead and say I'm going to assume he's going to watch Dune before The Power of the Dog. So I'm just going to do Power of the Dog real quick. I found the movie to be incredibly boring, and what good was in it wasn't enough to justify me saying, oh, actually it's pretty good, or I really loved it. Like, there's just it was like there was a lot in it that is beautifully shot. There was tension in there, but it was tension that I didn't care about. Like, I don't care about any of these people. So it's kind of like, if I was into this, if this elements of this appealed to me, I could see really loving it. So it's kind of odd. Like, I know it's a well-made movie, but it's just totally not for me. And so let's do a little bit of chatting movies, and we're going to go over The Power of the Dog. I got to clear my throat, so I'm going to play the chatting movies song and mute my mic.
best human being.
All right. So, Power of the Dog. I have to read my friend Dan Cameron's review. I took a screenshot of it. He was on an NPR article. I think it was just announcing that Power of the Dog and Dune had picked up a lot of awards or nominations. And so my buddy wrote, Power of the Dog was so friggin' boring. Oh, but it comes together at the end, right? One thing happens during the whole movie. That's it. One interesting thing over the course of what felt like 18 hours of disjointed editing, forced acting, and cliche writing. But it's so beautiful. Fine, go look at a painting of mountains. Save yourself 17.5 hours. Ooh. Oh, the salt on that review, but I love it. Like I really I can't help but agree with that. I think the acting was a little better than what he's saying, but yeah, yeah, it felt really long. I'm gonna read a couple other reviews from Letterboxd. That's letterboxd.com. It's a film site that I really enjoy. This review was by Matt Lynch. He gave it 2.5 stars out of 5. He said, lovely to look at, but Campion's aiming at some pretty soft targets here and with some pretty stale powder. Hardly the she's back coup de grace we were hoping for. Yeah, I see what you're saying, Matt. Yeah, I think it is. It's just kind of like, oh, I've seen this particular thing done better. Whether it was more tension or something. I don't know. Yeah, it's like let's find a really positive one. This one's just fun. This is 4 stars. This is a review by Brat. It's Brat. Brat says the masculine urge to cope with your step uncle's pointed homophobia by storming outside and aggressively hula hooping. I think that was the funniest scene to me, was the aggressive hula hooping, because you had just been shamed publicly. I was like, yeah, that's a way to handle that for sure. That they constantly talk about this character who's never on screen called Bronco Henry. And yeah, this person says this is 3.5 stars. Nico De Gregorio said, very good, if a bit challenging on your patience. Don't know why I laughed out loud every time Cumberbatch said Bronco Henry, but I can tell you it was very loud and without fail. Such a funny name, Bronco Henry. Just whisper it to yourself, Bronco Henry. Bronco Henry. Ha! Did it again. That was Nico's review. He is correct. Every time they mention Bronco Henry in the movie, you're like, it's a little like you have to giggle a little bit. I don't know why. Where is this? Okay, this is a 5-star review by Karsten. Karsten says, we'll be piecing this one together for weeks. I have to comment on that particular line in a minute. Precise and uncomfortable movie about predation and protection. Loved it. Need to ride a horse immediately. So I think she hit the nail on the head about what is interesting in this movie. And I didn't really put it together after I finished, but it's like, yeah, I guess the theme is predation and protection. It's who you're trying to protect, how much you have to become a predator in order to protect them. Are you strong enough to protect your secret or those you love or anything like that? But then also attraction, how that changes the dynamic in people that in a way are very predatory. And one thing that stuck out to me was a scene where Kirsten Dunst's character is like trying to like remember how to play something on the piano, or she's just trying to learn it, but she's having a hard time. And Cumberbatch's character can hear it and he starts playing it flawlessly on his banjo. And then he just sort of menacingly comes out of his room and starts playing it like aggressively at her. And that's kind of his way of saying, like, you may be my brother's wife, but you can't banjo like I do. You should just stop with that piano business. And for how silly that kind of is, it does have this like feeling of like, ugh, like, what's wrong with this guy? Bronco Henry really did a number on him. And but we'll be piecing this one together for weeks. That's what I wanted to touch on. That's almost always the thing with these like Oscar movies, like the ones that are like what you some would call Oscar bait. The Power of the Dog is definitely Oscar bait. It's like this weighty, boring period piece that you're supposed to watch, and it's like it takes, you have to think about it and you have to really like take it apart and then put it back together, and what is it trying to say? That kind of filmmaking has value, and it's important to have movies that aren't immediately digestible. But sometimes I think movies set out to be that without having much to actually piece together. And I don't think that this is saying anything very profound or deep. It's kind of like it's almost like a drawn out, boring love child of Brokeback Mountain and Rushmore. That's my review. The boring, drawn out love child of Brokeback Mountain and Rushmore. Not as funny or as interesting or stylish as Rushmore, and not as deeply satisfying as spitting in your hand and making love like Brokeback Mountain. So that is my review of one of the movies off of the Best Picture Oscar nominations. We'll do more next time. And with that, that's wrapping up Chat Movies. And we're going to get into this day in history, which we might have to come up with a little Sting song for sometime soon. And we'll wrap this whole thing up. So the featured event is Saint Bernadette's first visions of Mary at Lourdes. Is it Lourdes or Lourdes? That's in France. It's Lourdes. On this day in 1858 in Lourdes, France, 14-year-old Bernadette Soubirous, Miller's daughter, first had visions of the Virgin Mary. Right. That were authenticated by the Pope Pius IX in 1862, initiating the cult of Our Lady of Lourdes.
What the hell is even that?
I don't know what that is or why it matters. I do like how it was authenticated by the Pope. Like, oh yes, she definitely hallucinated. That's how I take that anyways. Like, whatever the fuck that's about. The featured biography is René Descartes.
Yes.
He was a French mathematician and philosopher, and he died February 11th, which is today, but back in 1650 at the age of 53 in Stockholm, Sweden. My people, Sweden, let's go. So, a couple other famous people that were born on this day. We have Damian Lewis, a British actor. He was born in 1971. Then in 1969, Jennifer Aniston was born.
Naughty! Naughty jungle of love!
And then we had Sarah Palin born in 1964.
She was abusive to the staff.
Jeb Bush was born in 1953.
666, the mark of the beast!
And Richard Wesley Hamming, American mathematician. Got nothing for that one. I'm not sure who that guy is. So, some events from this day. We have American rhythm and blues singer Whitney Houston who emerged as a pop star in the 1980s, especially known for her soaring voice, died at the age of 48. She had a really tragic life to me. Her battle with addiction was always kind of in the news and something you knew about. And while it may have led to some funny jokes here and there, it was very sad. So I won't have a sound drop for you, Whitney. I hope you rest in peace if there's something after all this when we die. I hope you're having a great time singing up in heaven or in another realm, whatever it is. Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak. Hosni Mubarak, I think that's how you said it. I remember Mubarak. He steps down after nearly 30 years in power following mass demonstrations that were part of the pro-democracy uprisings known as the Arab Spring.
Daddy, chill.
That's to the military trying to hold down the pro-democracy uprising. That's why I'm using that one. After serving 27 years in prison, Nelson Mandela was released, and he subsequently began negotiations with President F.W. de Klerk that ended apartheid in South Africa. Fuck yeah. Hell, let's go, Nelson Mandela. Fuck you, de Klerk. Maybe Klerk was all right. I don't know. I can't speak on Klerk. But they ended apartheid in South Africa. That's a very good thing because fuck the apartheid. In 1989, the Reverend Barbara Harris of the Protestant Episcopal Church became the first female bishop in the Anglican Communion.
What the hell is even that?
I don't know, but yeah, first female bishop. A little bit of progress in some kind of silly religion. That's fun. British politician Margaret Thatcher was elected leader of the Conservative Party, replacing Edward Heath. She became Europe's first woman prime minister in 1979. So it's a little mixed, you know, it's progress, but also Margaret Thatcher, like, Conservative Party. So we'll give her this one.
Because next time I come for you, I'm going to want some cocktail. Fruit.
Yes. Next time. American inventor Thomas Edison, who singly or jointly held a world record of 1,093 patents and who played a critical role in introducing the modern age of electricity. For those that don't know, Thomas Edison also ripped off a lot of people's inventions, and so those patents are highly questionable in some regards. And so this is for my buddy Shaka Locke, who I know is a big fan of Tesla. This goes out to you, Thomas Edison.
666, the mark of the beast!
Yes.
Yes.
With that, I think that is about what we're going to wrap up this with. One last one, the time capsule, February 11th, 1949. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, president of Columbia University, is named temporary presiding officer of Joint Chiefs of Staff and principal military advisor to President Harry S. Truman and the Secretary of Defense. Eisenhower, in my opinion, you have to kind of take historical figures for the time that they existed in. You can't apply today's modern politics and things of that nature to them. So I'm sure Dwight D. Eisenhower had his flaws, but in my opinion, he was the last Republican I personally would have voted for. And I think going forward, rather than this bizarre cult of Trump thing that the Republican Party has become, it's going to take a long time. Maybe even a new party needs to emerge, but I could get behind a more conservative party that maybe even elected a former general or military type person. When was Eisenhower the last time we elected a former general to the presidency? I don't know, but you know, I'm not into the military worship that some people are, but I do think they have the experience to run things like, oh, I don't know, governments or countries. Hopefully they're a good person. And Dwight D. Eisenhower gave a speech about the threat of the military industrial complex that I think everybody should look up and listen to and just kind of wrap your head around that. This former general Republican giving a speech about the military industrial complex and how it will erode freedoms and economic equality in our country if we allow it to become the engine that drives our country. So with that, yeah, we need more Eisenhowers in the Republican Party. Would he even be considered progressive these days? And probably not progressive, but definitely more like a Democrat, kind of like a soft right. Because for those that don't know, Democrats, for the most part, are not liberal. They are a right-wing party that just feels more liberal because of how far right the Republican Party is. Go to any other country in the world, especially in Europe, then you'll start to see, oh, that's what a socialist party is. Oh, that's what a democratic socialist party is. That's what a liberal party is. Interesting. I have to go back to it, but it is that story of the family who was working with a friend of mine in Logan, Utah, and they were like, I gotta get out of the city. It's getting too liberal and crazy. And he's saying that the town, Logan, Utah, has become too liberal and crazy. And if that's too liberal and crazy for him, like, I don't know what to do with that guy, because he has not been exposed to the world as a whole. And I feel bad for him, because that seems like a scary place to be in your head if Logan is too liberal for you. Like, you probably just step into Seattle and automatically shit yourself or something like that.
Yes.
All right, with that, we're done. I think I went a lot longer than I anticipated. So here's a pat on the back. I will see you all maybe with Kellen back on the next one. I think that's how it's going to work. But if not, we'll do another solo one, but this will be the day you see it. I'm not even going to bother to think of what day it is. Anyway, with that being said, stay safe. I might see some of you in Utah after this has been recorded, and yeah. Ta-ta! Thank you for listening to The Jacob Wayne Show. If you would like to contact us, please write us at fakoshka@gmail.com. That is FAKOSHKA@gmail.com. You can find us on Spotify, iTunes, and YouTube. Simply search The Jacob Wayne Show and it should pop right up. Make sure you like and subscribe and leave a review and share this podcast with your friends. Please write us. It helps add content to the show and makes the show even better for you, the listener. Thanks for tuning in.
Welcome to the